kiss for you.
So I originally looked at Genshin Impact when it came out in 2020 as a very impressive mobile game because I started playing it on my phone and I was like, wow, this is really, as many people kind of pointed out, a gap bridger between the PC and mobile space. And it really felt like an incredibly impressive and incredibly ambitious mobile game that took a lot of the elements from other games like Zelda, for instance, and made it available on a phone for free. And I really just felt like this grand achievement that it could even do something like that. And then I tried to play it on PC and kind of just noped out of it real quick. There was a couple issues with the PC port when it came to how it mapped things like the mouse for looking around for things like the camera, and how it kind of used movement as well as the keybinds and stuff. And it just really wasn't a very good PC port when it came to that thing. And it really was kind of feeling like it was designed for mobile and mobile usability first, and then just happened to have almost like an emulation of that for PC. And obviously, since Genshin Impact, there's been a number of other games that have kind of also bridged the gap and been a little bit more complete. And Wuthering Waves is absolutely kind of one of those. And the most impressive thing to me about Wuthering Waves is the fact that it feels like a PC game first that just happens to run on your phone instead of the other way around, right? And Genshin and its design language and its wide open worlds and its combat style really lend itself well to a more mobile-centric thing. Wuthering Waves is a primarily feeling combat-focused open world PC action game rather than a mobile one, and you can really feel that. And I think that's such an impressive feat that it's able to do that running on mobile and primarily feeling like a PC game. And because of that, I am much more blown away by what Wuthering Waves is able to do, especially now, compared to Genshin, just in the amount of ambitious stuff it tries to do. And the first thing that you notice from that is the graphical capability. This is one of the best looking anime style games I've ever seen. That goes for anything from Bandai Namco, that goes from anything from Square Enix, anything from Koei Tecmo, any of that stuff. This is the best looking anime styled game I've ever seen, from how the lighting works to how the draw distances and the open world aspects and the traversal and everything about this game just feels extremely high quality. The character detail and the modeling work here is exceptional on a lot of things, on both the enemies and your playable characters, and it's just really super impressive from a graphical standpoint. And the fact that this is able to run, obviously not as well as you're seeing here because this is the PC version, but it's able to run a decent clip on relatively strong mobile phones, is super impressive. The music is phenomenal, way better than I thought it would be. Obviously, we had known, ever since Genshin, that Genshin and MiHoYo are able to do very good music for their games, but you're not really expecting other companies that are trying to be in a similar vein to really compete with that, especially not a relatively unknown developer like Kuro. The music in this game, first off, I'm not sure if this intro music, like the start music, is specific to like their new version 2.4 or not, but the intro music is phenomenal. In fact, from start screen intros or start screen music, I would say it's absolutely in like my top 3, top 5. Like, it's just incredible, orchestral with the voices in the background. It reminded me a lot of Nier or other Final Fantasy games in that aspect. And then you just get unique music for a lot of the bosses, as well as a lot of the towns and cities and open world areas. And it just feels like a really cohesive, really well mixed, and really accurately placed. That might be another thing, but like a lot of the time sound design games is just kind of all muddled in the front. Everything just sounds like it's coming from one location in front of you, and it's kind of muddied. This game does a really good job of using like almost like binaural audio and being like, okay, this is in the left, this is in the right, this is behind you, this is in front of you, that kind of thing. With some really nice sound mixing that kind of melds everything together there. So it's absolutely in a league of its own in terms of the graphics, in terms of the music, and then the other two things, the combat and the kind of design, UI design. So the combat in the game is quite interesting. You have a basic attack, you have a follow-up attack by just holding that button down, you have your special, which is like your effect for whatever weapon you have your little echo attack, which is going to depend based on whatever echo is equipped, you have your ultimate, which is, you know, your ultimate charge up, you have an E that you can hold, that is based on like a boost gauge at the bottom there that you can fill up, you have a dodge, that you're able to follow up with a counterattack, and then when you get a grapple a little bit later on, you're able to use that grapple and do a ground slam, as well as use the grapple to get out of encounters. So that is 8 different options for combat abilities, when most games, especially mobile games, have, I would say, 4, right? A lot of the time you're looking at games and you have like the 4 face buttons and you have a dodge, right? A lot of games do that. This game, you have about 8 options in terms of, you know, you can do basic attacks, you can do the boost stuff, which I really like, because it incentivizes you to do combos correctly and kind of set things up well so you get more boost. The grapple is really good because you can, again, launch out like a wire bug and Monster Hunter, launch out and slam back down. So there's a lot of good combat variety in this game that really incentivizes you to experiment with stuff, on top of being able to obviously switch at any point to your other characters and do those things as well. Now, some of that is dependent on weapons, so like some characters will use swords versus like stabs effectively versus guns, and so those will kind of affect your main abilities. The other thing I really like is on the gun users, you're able to kind of go into like aim down sights, which is really nice. You're not just firing from the hip like ZZZ does. With its gun characters, you're able to kind of actually like aim and shoot things, so that can be useful later on for like weak points, as well as just being able to aim at what you want, free aim, which is quite nice. And so you just have a good amount of variety when it comes to the combat there. There's not really a point where it feels like I'm having to spam the same thing over and over again. Well, a lot of these things are obviously on cooldown. Some stuff is just, as mentioned, with the boost gauge based on how much you fill it up. So you never really feel like you're locked out of options because the combat isn't like ready for you yet. That's a complaint I had in ZZZ that I will talk about in that video, is the combat in that game really just feels like you're waiting a lot of the time for your E ability to come up, or the ability to like dodge so you can activate the next part of your combo chain. It doesn't feel like that in this game. This game feels extremely responsive in that way, where things are on enough of a cooldown where it feels like you need to actually like figure out what you want to use, but not too long of a cooldown where it feels like you never get a chance to use it. I guess is the best way of describing that. So the graphics, the quality of the music, the combat design is very excellent. And then the last thing, the kind of major benefit that the game has, on top of just being a great PC port, all the features and stuff, is how the like menus are designed. And going back to things like, obviously it's stealing a lot from Genshin in terms of where stuff is placed and how it's kind of organized and all that, and a lot of the progression, but I really appreciate, especially just coming back from working on a video for ZZZ, and how that game over time has just thrown so much crap at you in the menus, to the point where the main screen that you're walking around on has like flashing, jumping new icons next to a bunch of the things you can click on that also have like shortcut buttons stapled onto them, that also has a map that has a little smaller quick travel map in it, that also has the like, hey, you have a gift button stapled to the side as well, with the P button you have there on top of your things to the other side that are also blinking, on top of your like objective marker that's also blinking and swirling around you. And it's just like, it's so much. And because this is such a confined space, like you're not in large open spaces, all that gets constrained into like a very small window of actual like readable space, and so it just becomes an absolute mess. You're looking at the menu and like, what is this? All this over here, all this over here, this is swirling around, and it's just a disaster. Wuthering Waves has probably one of the best menu designs I've seen from these kind of games, and these kind of games being like basically any gacha game that's bothering to have 3D elements. A lot of them are using this sort of menu design because Genshin uses this menu design. But I really appreciate how, for instance, if you want to access, you know, your phone or your thing that has all the stuff in it, it's just in the top right, it's out of the way, and most of the things, in fact, I'm pretty sure all the things except for the synthesis and the animus, are stuff you don't really need to use, right? Your tutorials, your databanks, your saves, your email, and all that are things that aren't super needed, so you don't need to go to that menu. If you want to access synthesis, I believe you have to go to that menu, but things like the animus, or sorry, not animus, your character portrait, whatever that's called, is also accessible directly next to it, so you don't have to go into that menu. But I really like that because a lot of games, what they'll do is they'll put everything in that menu, but they'll also put it in like 7 other places, and that gets really annoying because you have to check that menu and go through all these things in order to get to the stuff you want. I really like how this game doesn't bother with that. It's just like, hey, here's some stuff that you might care about. It's all in this menu if you want to go at it, but the actual important things are directly next to it. So if you don't want to open that menu, you don't have to. Shortcuts also still work. You can still press J and I and P and all that for those things, but they're not stapled to the interface like they are in some other games. So I really appreciate that. And that really creates the trifecta of fantastic graphics, great music, great combat design, and a workable UI that doesn't get in the way of what you're trying to do. So it really just creates an easy experience to play with, again, a great PC port and just the quality you'd expect from a lot of AAA games in terms of that polish. And the only con I can really get the game or give the game is that the story, and I know that they've fixed that later on, but the story up front is rough. Not because it's not, voice acted, where you're just going through a bunch of text like Star Rail tends to be. This game is just very front-loaded with a bunch of non-interesting story elements, but a lot of it is voice acted and in English, which is not rare, but definitely a very welcome surprise. Doesn't mean that it's more interesting that way. I still end up skipping through a lot of it, but again, it's a pretty low barrier compared to some other games that are clogging story down your throat. So I do appreciate that, but as a main point of contention, getting through a lot of that story elements to get to the better parts of the game does take a little bit. Final point I want to mention here is something that is obviously plaguing some other games. Star Rail is having a really bad power creep thing where the new banner characters are like destroying the ability of the previous characters to do stuff, and because of that, the story's grinding to a halt until you have those characters. And then Infinity Nikki retconning most of its story, redoing a bunch of progression systems, and making the gacha way worse is also not ideal, and kind of destroying that goodwill from the community. So you're seeing a lot of these games from developers that people a lot of the time very appreciate and like. You're seeing them kind of falter. And I'm not going to tell you that Wuthering Waves can't go down that same route. It could absolutely go down that same route. I will say that similar to something like ZZZ in its progression, where it starts kind of rough at first, it gets a big update that fixes a lot of stuff, and in ZZZ's case, it's starting to go down, right? It's starting to kind of go downhill a little bit in terms of the execution and what it's doing. Again, I'll talk more about that game in its own video. But for Wuthering Waves, it feels like it's just going up. It kind of launched a little bit rough. The 2.0 update added a bunch of stuff, reworked the story, fixed some of the progression problems, kind of reworked there's an ability, at least right now, once you're past a certain point in the main story, to start with the new prologue that actually introduces things a little bit better. But it says, get to this point, I think, in the end shore or something like that in the main story before you switch over, but it does give you that option to kind of start with a new player experience, which I really appreciate. It gives you the option instead of what Infinity Nikki did, which is just completely get rid of the old option in favor of this worse option. So I do appreciate how they give you that option there. But all this to say, it's possible that Wuthering Waves goes down that same path where it eventually becomes worse over time. But that's kind of the risk you take with live service games in general. You're always going to have the option of one update breaking or making the game in a lot of aspects, and that's just kind of something you have to contend with when you play these games and when you listen to reviews and sort of discussions of the game. Is an update could break the game, like Infinity Nikki, right? It launched, it had a very good reviews. Update 1.5 destroys the game, and now it's not really worth playing until they fix it. So those things can happen. I don't foresee it happening to this game, at least anytime in the near future. But again, as a reminder with these kind of games, it's always possible that a future update destroys some things. So overall, yeah, I'd say I definitely would recommend the game. It's free. It's on PC with Epic Games. I believe it's also on Steam, which is very nice. If you don't want to use Epic Games, you don't have to. It's also available on its own launcher, iOS, Android. From what I've seen, I don't recommend it on Android because a lot of games like this cook your battery and also destroy any other things that are working currently on the, it's not really a well-designed Android experience. iOS from Apple Silicon stuff tends to work a little bit better. So I'd recommend this game if you have a 14, 15, or 16 iPhone. And if you have a top of the line Android phone with like an 8 Elite Gen 2 or whatever it is, I'd recommend it. But anything else, I kind of stay away from this game because it is quite graphically demanding, both in terms of power and in terms of the heat output. But it is available on mobile if that is your preferred way of playing these games. Last thing here on the gacha, I guess I'll just mention, I haven't done a ton of them, but I have done a couple of them. The only thing I don't like currently about the gacha system is that there is different weapon gacha tokens versus the normal ones. So like you have the normal banners in like gold, and then you'll have the other ones in blue, but then you'll have the weapon ones be a different gold, and that's kind of annoying because a lot of games don't do that. They'll just say, hey, here's some pulls and figure out what you want to use them on, right? This game decides that it needs weapons to be its separate thing, so I don't really like that. But overall, it seems like the gacha is pretty standard. Pricing uses the same Genshin Impact pricing, so 10 pulls is going to be like $12 to $15 or whatever it is, depending on what kind of bracket you buy into it with the extras, bundles, and all that kind of thing. Monetization is pretty standard. You have gacha, you have a battle pass, you have a kind of sub model, you have the store that most of the time just sells useless things. It's a single player game primarily with some co-op elements, so it's not like you're going to be spending a bunch of money to like gain a bunch of power to fight other people. I don't think there's any PvP in the game, so you don't have to worry about that. So all those kind of like technical details, hopefully I've explained those decently. But yeah, I would definitely say that this is a game you should be looking for, and I would say it's probably the best of the options for gacha right now. If you're looking for something action-oriented, I am going to be reviewing a couple more turn-based ones that are similar but very different to Star Rail. So if you're more into the turn-based aspect, you can subscribe to the channel for making sure you catch those reviews. Those will be up soon, hopefully. But if you're looking for something that's more open world and or action oriented, this is absolutely the best one, bar none. Tower Fantasy Genshin and Infinity Nikki don't even come close. So that's just my opinion. Obviously, you can have your opinion on what you think about the game from someone that has maybe played it a lot longer than I have. I just got in recently within like the 2.2 update, so my perspective on this game is quite new. So if you down in the comments want to comment and you've been here from the beginning and can kind of talk about that, then that would be pretty cool. Love to see the discussion there. But anyway, if you enjoy this kind of content and want to see more of this on the channel, make sure to like, subscribe, and do all that, and I'll see everyone in the next video.